I'm not crazy, Dr. Eleanor Carmichael repeated. Eleanor was handcuffed to a cold metal table in a small interrogation room in Fayetteville's tiny police station. The room was getting warmer, and the dried mixture of earth and blood that covered Eleanor's body began to mix with her sweat, making her feel even more uncomfortable than she already was. The stocky police officer across from her didn't seem to notice or care. He wasn't wearing a traditional uniform, or any uniform at all, but jeans and a black sweater. Eleanor wouldn't have known he was a cop if not for the fact that he wore a police badge loosely around his neck. The badge would shake slightly every time the officer tapped his thick fingers impatiently on the table, creating a drumbeat that echoed off the small room's walls. "You're either crazy or lying," he said, with a voice much deeper than one would expect of a man of his stature. "Unless you really expect me to believe that all 6 of your students were gored by a deer." The officer sighed. "Because last I checked, we haven't had a deer mass goring in West Virginia since ever." He smiled cruelly. "It wasn't a deer," Eleanor managed. "It just looked like one." The officer leaned back. "Right. So this deer thing decided to kill all of your students, then decided that it had enough fun so you weren't worth killing." The officer's eyes snapped to Eleanor's. "Or the deer is the invention of a desperate woman who doesn't want this conversation to end with her behind bars." Eleanor choked back a sob. "It left me alone because I told it to in Salgi." The officer smiled. "I don't think I've heard of Salgi." "It's what the Cherokee spoke," Eleanor muttered, "and it didn't gore my students. It tore them apart with its hands." Eleanor choked back another sob, mud streaming down her face with her hot tears. "Tore them apart. Right." The officer paused. "Do you want to know what I think?" He smiled. "I think that a psychopathic anthropology professor lured 6 of her students out to the woods to fulfill some sick fantasy." Eleanor began to shake as sobs overtook her. She couldn't hold them back any longer. "Detective Pearson, can you step out for a moment?" A female voice called over the intercom. Detective Pearson sighed and stood, pausing just long enough to sneer. "You should try to come up with something more convincing." The heavy door slammed shut behind Pearson as he left the room. Eleanor stared at the one-way mirror to her right. The reflection in the mirror looked like a ghost of herself. Her blonde hair, usually in a tight bun, hung loose and caked in dirt. Her face was similarly stained, a sharp contrast to the clarity of her grey eyes, the only part of her she still recognized. Were all of them killed? The thought clawed at her relentlessly. She could still see it, the creature, rising on his hind legs, his human hands clutching Olivia like a rag doll. She could still hear the sound of her screams being cut off with the sickening crunch of her spine separating. She could still smell the metallic odor of her blood as it rained down on her. Eleanor was startled from her thoughts by the door opening. Detective Pearson stepped back into the room. "Looks like we won't be together much longer," he said, his smug smirk and cruel. "The feds are quite eager to meet you. I don't think they've gotten to talk to anyone as fucked up as you in a while. Hopefully you worked on your story. I'd hate for you to disappoint them." He flashed a sadistic smile as he uncuffed her from the table. The hallway outside the interrogation room was cooler. Eleanor felt her shoulders ease just a little as the air touched her skin. Fayetteville's police station was tiny but didn't feel dingy. The station walls were brick everywhere where there wasn't a window, which there was plenty of, or a mural, which there was also plenty, depicting the state's history. Although it was dark outside, the station was well lit but not oppressive, and the tiled floor was so clean that Eleanor could see her dirt-caked reflection staring up at her. Eleanor saw what she assumed was the only other station staff. Unlike Pearson, the 4 wore well-ironed uniforms that matched their well-kept workspaces. They tried their best to look away when Eleanor caught one of them staring at her. They avoided her gaze, but not before she caught the fear and disgust in their eyes. Pearson led Eleanor into a small office, and the momentary sense of calm that Eleanor had faded as she stepped into another cramped, warm space. The office was simple. The only decoration was a desk with chairs on either side. Standing behind the desk were two suited figures, federal, unmistakably. The mountain of a man was about 6 feet tall, with shoulders so broad and arms so big, it looked as if his navy blue suit was struggling to contain him. He wore a stoic expression, which made his dark features look incredibly intimidating. Next to him stood a much shorter woman with auburn hair and a tight bun. While she wasn't built like the monster of a man to her left, Eleanor could still see that she was in impeccable shape. She wore glasses and had a youthful face that might be mistaken for a teenager, if not for the sharp, assessing eyes behind those lenses. Both had badges clearly displaying their faces, and 3 letters, FBI. The woman extended her hand to Detective Pearson, who shook it politely. "Thank you for your quick cooperation," she said. "I know that it can be frustrating for police departments when the Bureau gets involved, but you were all very pleasant and very understanding." "It's not frustrating at all. Honestly, the quicker I can forget about her, the better," Pearson replied. "I think we all feel that way." The woman nodded and smiled diplomatically. "In that case, let us take her from you," the woman said. The large man walked over to Eleanor. Up close, he was even more massive, easily over 6 feet. He placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "This way," he said, leading Eleanor out of the station. The woman followed closely behind. Outside, the night air was crisp and cool, and Eleanor took a deep breath to calm herself. A blacked-out SUV was parked in front of the station, which the man led her to. "Sam, can you get those off of her?" the woman said, gesturing to Eleanor's handcuffs. "I don't think she needs them." "Of course," the man said in a surprisingly soft voice. He removed Eleanor's handcuffs and smiled kindly at her before opening the door to the SUV. "Please, get in and relax. We have a long drive." Eleanor hesitated, then climbed in. The seats were plush, and the interior smelled faintly of citrus and leather. The woman settled into the passenger seat and turned to face Eleanor. "Are you hungry?" the woman asked. Eleanor's stomach rumbled before she could answer, and she realized just how hungry she was. Yes. I haven't eaten anything since..." Eleanor trailed off, trying to remember her last meal. "Since before you were attacked," the woman said. Eleanor's eyes snapped up. "You believe I was attacked?" The woman smiled. "Yes, of course." "This isn't a tactic to make me confess or anything, because I've read about..." Eleanor replied quickly. Sam started chuckling in the driver's seat. "I know the FBI just wants a confession," Eleanor continued. "And We're not FBI, Dr. Carmichael," the woman interrupted. "Here, look." The woman removed her FBI badge and handed it to Eleanor. The name below the picture of the woman in the passenger seat read Amy Smith. "Do I look like an Amy Smith to you?" the woman asked. "We don't work for the FBI. My name is Tasha." Eleanor blinked. "If you're not with the FBI, who sent you? What do you want from me?" "We'll explain everything to you once you've eaten, washed up, and settled in," Sam said. "But you believe we were attacked," Eleanor said. "Do you know what happened to my students?" Tasha exchanged a somber glance with Sam and took a deep breath before replying softly. "They're dead, Eleanor. I'm sorry." "Oh." Eleanor's vision blurred. She blinked furiously, but the tears came anyway. The pain hit her like a fist to the gut as she recalled how eager her students had been to take a trip out of state to study anthropology. Eleanor had always tried to sponsor a trip over spring break to some archaeological site or place of interest in North America, but usually only 1 or 2 students would sign up, if any signed up at all. So when 6 students signed up to go to West Virginia with her for a week of playing in the dirt, looking for Cherokee arrowheads, she considered it one of the significant moments of her educational career. What were they like? A kind voice rang out from the driver's seat, pulling Eleanor back to reality. Eleanor blinked, trying to clear the tears in her eyes. You don't have to tell us if you don't want to, Sam continued, but I think it could help. Eleanor said nothing. I'm sorry to bring. Eleanor cut Sam off. Ian was probably just going because he wanted to get Olivia's attention, she said, her voice shaking slightly, and he convinced Isaac to go with him to back him up. How did that go? Sam asked carefully. Terribly. Eleanor managed a weak laugh. Those boys are some of the most clueless people I've ever met. Or were. Eleanor's voice trailed off as she began to weep again. I'm sorry. I can't. Tasha looked at Eleanor sympathetically. That's okay. You don't have to tell us if you don't want to. Eleanor managed to nod in thanks. We're here, Sam called from the driver's seat. The SUV had pulled into a motel parking lot. The parking lot was poorly lit, and the motel looked like the kind of place where you don't get caught up after dark unless you're beyond desperate. Sam opened the door for Eleanor. Follow me, Dr. Carmichael. Eleanor followed Sam and Tasha to a unit on the second floor. Sam pulled out a key, unlocked the door, and opened it. The inside of the motel wasn't much more impressive than the outside. A single double bed sat in the middle of the room with off-white sheets. The bed was far too small for the space it was occupying, making the room feel empty. A small kitchenette and table were nestled in the back of the room, and the bathroom door seemed worn with age. There are clean clothes in the bathroom, Tasha said. Go get yourself cleaned up, and I'll go dig up something to eat. Eleanor nodded weakly before making her way to the bathroom. The bathroom was cleaner than the rest of the unit and not as cramped as Eleanor expected. As Eleanor undressed, she noticed that blood had soaked through her clothes and dried on her skin. She threw up what little she had in her stomach, making her feel well enough to start the shower. The water was hot, and had turned almost entirely brown by the time it was collected by the drain. The sound of the water running drowned the noise of her sobs. When Eleanor finished, she put on the sweatpants and t-shirt that Tasha had left for her and left her old clothes in a bloody mess on the floor. Tasha and Sam sat at the table, each eating a fast food cheeseburger. In front of the third chair by the table were 2 burgers, fries, and a bottle of water. Eleanor didn't say a word as she sat down and finished her first burger before Sam or Tasha made it halfway through theirs. She hadn't realized how starved she was until the food hit her stomach. Warm, greasy, grounding. It wasn't until she was halfway through her fries that she looked up and noticed the 2 watching her. Not unkindly, just patiently. Feeling more human? Tasha asked. Eleanor nodded and wiped her mouth. I think so. You know, most people in your situation would still be screaming or curled up in the corner. You're holding it together much better than I'd expect. I'm not, Eleanor said, pushing her hair behind her ear. I think I've just gone numb. Everything feels like it's happening around me right now. Sam nodded, chewing thoughtfully on a fry. Shock's a hell of a thing, but it fades fast. Once it does, you're going to have questions, Tasha said. Probably a lot of them. Eleanor glanced between them, tension creeping back into her shoulders. I already do. Like, who are you really? You said you weren't FBI and clearly knew more about what happened than the cops did. Are you military? CIA? Tasha took a sip of her water, seemingly weighing a thought. We don't work for the government, she finally said. Not in the way you're thinking. Tasha leaned forward, elbows on the table. We're part of a group called the Aegis Occulta. It's a private international organization that is very old and very quiet. Eleanor blinked. I've never heard of it. You're not supposed to, Sam interjected. That's kind of the point. More of a secret society than organization, Tasha admitted. What does it do? Eleanor leaned forward. Tasha took a breath. We operate in the margins, outside of governments, outside of public knowledge. Our job is to deal with things like what you saw in the woods. And when things crawl out of the dark like that, Sam said for a bite of his burger, we're the ones who step in. So you're what? Monster hunters? Eleanor stared at them. Sam grinned. Something like that. We do an awful lot besides just killing monsters. We have to ensure that the public doesn't discover the monsters exist. That could cause a panic. So why am I here? Eleanor asked. If secrecy is so important, why are you telling me? Because we think that we can use your knowledge and instincts, Tasha said. I screamed, I ran and I cried, Eleanor said. You spoke to it in a language it understood because you could apply your instincts and knowledge when it counted, Tasha replied. I think it's fair to say that you did more than scream, run and cry. Eleanor looked at the half-eaten burger in front of her, her appetite suddenly gone. It doesn't matter, Eleanor said. Everyone else is still dead. Tasha pondered her following words carefully. Yeah, your students died, and I can't pretend to understand how that feels. But I'm offering you a chance to save so many more. Eleanor's breath became shaky as she struggled to fight off more tears. I can't let anyone else die. Tasha nodded. Then don't.